I want to apply all this to our faith. And the way I want to do that is to borrow an illustration from Peter Rollins. Peter Rollins is a philosopher and theologian. He's a philosopher who is he does theology, but by training, he's a philosopher. He's from Northern Ireland. We interviewed him on Drunk Ex-Pastors some years back. And he uses the illustration of a traditional magic trick to sort of bring home these truths. And so I want to do that here. Now, we've all seen magic tricks, card tricks, coin tricks, whatever. A traditional magic trick has three components to it. There is the pledge, the turn, and the prestige. Okay? And here's how they work. The pledge is when an object is shown to the audience. Let's say it's a coin, right? The magician shows the audience a coin. Here's a coin, right? And everyone sees it. Okay, there's a coin. It could be anything, but in this case, let's just use a coin. The pledge, the magician shows the audience an object, right? The turn is when that object vanishes, right? The magician rubs the coin against his elbow and it's gone, right? That's the turn. When the object that has been presented to the audience in the pledge is made to magically, mysteriously vanish. All right, that is the turn. And the prestige, that third component and final component of a traditional magic trick, is when the magician, for example, after having made the coin disappear, he lifts a glass off the table and there's the coin underneath the glass. Right? Oh, everyone goes, wow, how did he do that? Right? He had the coin in his hand, he rubbed it against his elbow, it was gone, he lifts a glass, there's the coin, right? That is the prestige. That is that third component to a magic trick. Now, if you know anything about sleight of hands, and we all probably know a little bit about sleight of hands. Much of what I know about magic I learned from Job Bluth, played by Will Arnett on Arrested Development, one of the greatest comedy series of all time. He was this desperate, pathetic, amateur magician who just demanded respect but never got it, right? And there are so many instances where he's trying to do some trick and wow, like he's making a speech in a boardroom, or he's trying to impress a girl, or wherever he happens to be doing an actual magic act on stage. And it's like he'll have a dove and he'll do something magical, and all of a sudden some dead dove will fall out of his sleeve, or he'll try to make fire come out, but it just lighter fluid comes out, shoots out of something on his wrist, and he'll be like, yeah, but where'd the lighter fluid come from, right? If you know anything about sleight of hands, that the coin that was under the glass was there the whole time, right? It's not magic. It's not that the coin that was shown to the audience in the pledge is the same coin that vanished and then reappeared magically underneath the pint glass on the table. No, that was already there. The coin that was presented in the pledge, most likely through sleight of hand, was put down the back of your shirt, as you rub it on your shoulder, and there it goes. So, that's just how these magic tricks work. The initial dove, that dove's probably dead, right? And the one that flies out from the scarf or whatever is a different dove, okay? And so, again, is the Jesus that came out of the tomb the same that was put in there? Sort of, right? Not really, but kinda, I guess. Well, it's similar to the components of this magic trick, where the coin that miraculously reappears in the prestige is not the same coin. They both might be quarters, or nickels, or whatever kind of coin you were using, a silver dollar, but it's not the exact same one. It was there the whole time. The one that was made to vanish magically is down the back of the magician's shirt, okay? And so how does this apply to exile, to this exilic expression of faith, or this posture toward empire that I've been encouraging us all to strike? How does this all apply? Well, again, we've been talking about the death of the sacred object, right? Colossians chapter 2, 13 to 15, we saw where Paul says that God, in the death of Christ, put to death that whole system according to which God is a external sacred object. We've saw a few weeks back how that in the temple, which was itself modeled after the Garden of Eden. Back in the book of Genesis, the Jewish temple had that huge veil, that thick curtain that hung floor to ceiling that quarantined divinity from humanity. It was understood that the presence of God, the blinding holiness of the divine presence is back there. And that is why the only person who could go back there was the high priest once a year on the Day of Atonement to offer atonement for his own sin and for the sins of the people, right? And the idea that if the veil were breached, if it were somehow compromised, if that quarantine were to be compromised in some way, we would all die. The holiness of God would be unleashed, and we would all, like the Nazis and Raiders of the Lost Ark, when they opened the Ark of the Covenant that they had discovered, they all died. God killed them. Their faces melted off their skull, right? This mentality that we all have, as I've been saying, you go to any church on a Sunday morning when they're preaching the gospel, they're going to preach this same sort of serpentine message, right? It was the serpent who asked Eve, has God said you cannot eat of all the trees in the garden? And she said, no, we can eat of all of them except this one. We can't eat of that one, right? And the serpent says, no, you don't understand. Like, your void, everything that's lacking will be filled. But in order to get that, you have to transgress this prohibition, and you need to grasp that sacred object, right? And then, Adam and Eve sinned, and they were exiled east of Eden. And that same sort of dynamic is mirrored in the Jewish temple, where God is behind the veil. That's where he is, right? But then, as we've seen, when Jesus was dying on the cross and he uttered that cry of dereliction, my God, why have you forsaken me? Demonstrating, as Chesterton said, that God needs to be a rebel as well as a king, that God needs to not be all-powerful. Because if he's all-powerful, that diminishes him according to this schema. God became an atheist in that moment, right? It's like, as I've said, getting pantsed in junior high. Back in junior high, you were in PE, you got your PE uniform on, which, back in my day, little elastic waistband shorts, Someone sneaks up behind you, grabs the shorts by the sides, pulls them down. You're standing there in your tighty-whities, everybody laughs, you're exposed, right? And that is what Paul says that God did to the Mosaic economy and to the serpentine powers behind it, that God made a mockery of them, putting them to open shame. He disarmed principalities and powers, right? He made a public spectacle of them, okay? And so in the death of God, the veil, it says, when Jesus cried out that cry of dereliction, it says that the temple veil was torn in two from top to bottom. Much like getting pants in junior high, it exposed that serpentine system for the idolatrous lie that it is. There's nothing back there, right? The veil was torn. The expectation of everyone would have been, we're all going to die. It'd be like if a nuclear device were set off a mile away. It's like, we're all about to get incinerated, That's the expectation when that veil is torn. If that protocol is breached or compromised in any way, if that quarantine doesn't hold up, we're all going to die. But when God tears the veil and nothing happens, and no one gets zapped, no ghost comes out and and kills everybody, no grim reapers back there, nothing is back there. They just sewed it back up and went on with their business as usual, right? Well, what does that tell us? It tells us that God is, as it were, pantsing the Mosaic economy, the old covenant, and the serpentine principalities and powers behind it, showing it to be a lie, an idol, a deus ex machina, as we saw a couple talks back. And so the entire serpentine system, whereby we seek the aid of some external source that scratches all our itches, right? That entire system has been crucified at Calvary. And so in the same way that the initial coin in the pledge disappears in the turn, right? That is Jesus dying on the cross, the death of God, and the burial in the tomb. But then when he emerges in the prestige, it's similar enough to eventually be recognized as him, but different enough to be not just an extension of his earthly life, not just like Lazarus getting resuscitated, who would eventually die again. If Lazarus came out of the tomb after being dead for 4 days in John 11, he presumably was going to, grow old one day and die again, right? Because the life that he emerged with was the same life that he died with. No different, right? But as we've been saying, the kind of faith that I'm advocating for and arguing for is not just a lateral move, but it's meant to be something altogether different, right? And so in the same way that the coin that miraculously reappears in the Prestige is different, but similar to the one that disappeared in the Turn, likewise with Jesus, according to the New Testament Gospels and Paul's epistles, and likewise with our faith, right? Again, if we go through this supposed deconstruction process, right, according to which we're questioning all of the things we thought before, and we're doubting what we were taught, and we're kind of going back to the drawing board. But if you emerge with some slightly different but equally clung to and obsessed over faith, like going from being a Mormon to being a Jehovah's Witness, it's like, all right, it's kind of different, I guess, but not really, right? Or going from being an alcoholic to being addicted to CrossFit, it's like, well, it's more healthy, but it's still the obsessive nature of the grip with which you are tightly grasping onto this new thing, this new sacred object, is demonstrating that you haven't really grown. You've just changed the thing you're a fundamentalist about, right? And what's the point? There's no point of doing that. That's just a waste of everybody's time, right? And so with our faith, the emergence of something from the rubble, the emergence of something from that tomb on Easter Sunday needs to be of an altogether different order, or else it's just Lazarus resuscitated rather than the resurrection